if you ever feel overwhelmed by the enormity of the change you're trying to make in the world, just know that a tiny sliver of light is enough to transform the darkness, and we can all be that tiny sliver of light.
Welcome to Close Up Radio, where our hosts, Doug Llewelyn and Jim Masters, bring you the amazing stories of people who answered the call to unlock their potential and taken control of their own success with authenticity, creativity, persistence, and resilience. Close Up Radio special guests share their knowledge and wisdom so you, the listener, can live the most empowered life possible. Close Up Radio. And now, here's today's host, Doug Llewelyn.
Well, hi, everybody. We welcome you back to Close Up Talk Radio. Nice to have you with us. Hope it's a nice day wherever you are. We're excited because Dr. Melissa Corley-Carter is our guest. Again, we love talking to Dr. Carter. She's an amazing lady. If you've ever heard her, you know she's a remarkable woman. She's also known as, I love this, the barefoot dancing rocket scientist. She is a coach. She is a really, truly epic coach who helps humans live epic lives. And she really is an actual rocket scientist. She is a marathoner who has run 7 continents, marathons on 7 continents. She's also an astronaut reject. I love she can promote that. Not all of us, you don't know many astronaut rejects, do you? I love the fact that she uses that. She's a speaker, an award-winning author, and a certified professional coach who, as we pointed out, helps awesome humans live epic lives. By the way, I think it's interesting to point out, before she became a coach, Melissa did spend 20 years aspiring to become an astronaut. She earned 2 engineering degrees from Stanford University. She was commissioned as an officer in the U.S. Air Force. She earned a Ph.D. in aeronautical engineering from the Naval Postgraduate School. And despite having perfect vision after corrective eye surgery, her pre-surgical eyesight ended up disqualifying her and shattered her dreams of becoming an astronaut. As she looks back on it now, she really thinks that probably was not so bad. But, boy, what a kind of a life she has led. And her life, it's been epic. And as she quotes it, what's an epic life? It's a life that you live on your terms, aligned with your values and priorities. And a life as powerful, unique, and awesome as you are, it's the life you were born to live. That's what she helps her clients do, live epic lives. She has many, many great stories. We're going to talk about a number of them today. She's also going to be, she's doing a series of broadcasts with us now. She'll be back again on December 2nd and then December 20th. And we'll cover a lot in these 3 different broadcasts that we're doing. So it's a real pleasure to welcome Dr. Melissa Corley-Carter to us. Dr. Carter, Dr. Melissa, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much, Doug, for that introduction. I appreciate it.
Oh, listen, it's a treat to do an introduction for you because you have done so many fascinating things. You're based in Stanbridge, Virginia. By the way, where is Stanbridge? What are you near?
Southbridge. It's Dumfries. It's the Dumfries area. It's about halfway between Washington.
Oh.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do know where that is.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's near Quantico. It's between Washington, D.C. and Fredericksburg, Virginia.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, cool. All right, listen, we're going to talk a little bit today on your experience running marathons on 7 continents. I think a lot of people who run marathons have dreams of doing something like that. They don't do it. You did. And I guess the best question is, why? What inspired you to do that? How do you answer that?
Well, it's funny because I never really considered myself a runner, never really considered myself athletic, but when I joined the Air Force, you take an annual physical fitness test and you do PT, and so I started running in college when I was in ROTC, and then in my first Air Force assignment, one of my friends was a really good athlete and started taking me on longer and longer runs, and so I was getting better at running, and then my mom mentioned that there was a marathon in Big Sur, California, which is a place that I absolutely loved, had been to many times, and just thought it was beautiful. And I thought, wow, I would love to be able to run a marathon in Big Sur. It never occurred to me to actually run a marathon, but running in Big Sur would be really cool. So I trained for it. It was about 9 months away, and actually at the expo for the marathon, there was a booth for the 7 Continents Club, which is a group of people who run marathons on all 7 continents. And I didn't know that was a thing, but as soon as I found out about it, I thought, well, gosh, why not? Why would I not do that? And so it just kind of captured my imagination, and I never looked back from there.
And obviously, for those who aren't aware, a marathon it's 26 miles, right? Am I right on that?
26.2. Yes, 26.2.
The point two is
the point two is very important.
Why is that? By the way, why the hell is that? Do you know?
I actually do. So it's actually kind of crazy. The original marathon, I actually did the course of that. The original marathon was from the town of Marathon outside of Athens, Greece. And so there was a big victory won. Basically, the Athenians were a much smaller force, and they won a big victory over the Persians. And a runner named Phidippides, there's various legends about this. I mean, we're not entirely sure how accurate the story is, but the runner Phidippides took the message of victory to Athens. Marathon is about 24 miles away from Athens. So he took the message, actually Nike, that we get the word Nike from the word victory, that he basically whispered the word and died on the spot. So, but, the thing you don't always hear is that he also, it's like, okay, running a marathon won't actually kill you, but he had also run to Sparta and back earlier that week, which is like 200 and some miles away. Anyway, so the marathon, from Marathon to Athens, it's around 24 miles, but legend goes, or the story goes, that when the Olympics were held in London I'm not sure I'm going to get the year right, but I think 1908, the Queen wanted the marathon to end in front of the palace. And so they had to extend the distance so that it would end right in front of the palace. So that's where the other, kind of 2.2 comes from, or 1.2 or whatever. So to get the course to end in front of the Royal Palace.
That is a great story. By the way, I mean, running a marathon in Big Sur, it just sounds magnificent. Was it as great as you thought it was going to be, running there, of all places in the U.S.?
It absolutely was, yes. And it's interesting because I ended up running that marathon 2 years in a row, back to back. And there was a bit of a difference. So the very first time I ran it, in 2007, it was my first marathon, it was actually very foggy. And so, I knew what the coastline looked like, but you actually couldn't really see a whole lot of it. You're running on the road, and it's, of course, gorgeous, and the redwoods, running through that part is amazing. You can sort of see kind of right next to you, but you couldn't see, like, out over the ocean. But the next year that I ran it was not a cloud in the sky, bright, sunny day, and you could just see everything. So it was interesting actually experiencing both of those conditions. So, but it absolutely was amazing and gorgeous. And of course, tough. It's very hilly, and I've driven the road a few times since, thinking, how did I run all this way? That's just crazy. But it was a lot of fun.
It's funny. I remember I've never run a marathon, but I remember having lunch or drinks at a restaurant called Nepenthe. It's up in the Big Sur area. And we were there one day, and you're up high, and the cloud, you're over the clouds. We couldn't see the ocean because the clouds covered the ocean. It was that high that day. And then, other times we've been there, and it's been just gorgeous. Big Sur is something else. All right, let's talk about where else you ran. You've done that one. And I know I need to point out, you obviously have learned a lot from every one of these runs, and you have an award-winning coffee table book you brought out called Running the World, Marathon Memories from the 7 Continents. Let's talk about these 7 continents. Would you consider the one you did in Big Sur for this continent, or is there another one?
The Big Sur is my North American one, and I also did the Marine Corps Marathon, but I count Big Sur, and so Big Sur. What I learned there, incidentally, what I was just talking about as far as the view, whether it was cloudy or bright, the halfway point of the Big Sur Marathon is on a hill. It's the highest point it's mostly sea level course, but the high point is around 500 feet, and it's called Hurricane Point. It's very windy up there. You're gonna have to hold on to something so you don't get blown over. But they actually have a really cute little sign there that says, "Look back at where you've been," and you look over your shoulder, and theoretically you see the whole Big Sur coast laid out in front of you, and you just get to kind of pause and marvel at how far you've come. Like I said, that first year I looked back and all I saw was fog. I could not see the coastline, but I knew what it looked like, so I was excited. The next year when I looked back, I absolutely could see how beautiful and how far I had come. And so what I take away from that is one of those life lessons of how important it is to actually pause and celebrate our progress. A lot of times we think, we have to wait till we get to the finish line, or we have to wait till we get that next promotion, or till we get that white picket fence, or whatever it is, whatever goal that we're driving towards, we actually don't let ourselves celebrate along the way. So I'm a huge fan of acknowledging our progress and celebrating our progress and saying, wow, I just did that. And I just took one step, and I'm amazed by that. So celebrating every step along the way and not waiting until the end, some nebulous endpoint to declare success, as it were.
That's a great point to point out. By the way, you said the elevation, you'd gone up 500 feet. Is that right?
Yes, it's not very high, but it was yes, it was basically like 2 mile uphill that got to the top. Yes.
Ooh, I can't imagine running a marathon where you have to go uphill 2 miles.
Yes.
And still,
yes.
You've got 19 more miles to go or 20 more miles. Good for you. Bless your heart. I mean, what an achievement to do that. For anybody who does that, what an achievement it is. So you did that one, and then you started focusing on other continents. Let's talk about them. Take me through some of those other runs you've done.
Yeah, so the next one I did was actually the Athens Classic Marathon, again, the one that went from the town of Marathon to Athens. And that one we actually finished in the Olympic Stadium in Athens. So there's the big Olympic rings, and so it's the actual track that they use for their races. And that was really cool. And I think what that one kind of, aside from basically just running in the footsteps of history and of the first technically marathon runner, which was very cool, and going through Athens and the agora and where there's little signs that say Socrates walked here, which is not something you hear every day, and so that was very cool. But I think thinking about those Olympic rings and finishing in the stadium really brought out to me the concept that everybody is a champion. I think a lot of times we think success is only the gold medal in the Olympics. And if we don't get the gold medal, then we're somehow less than or inferior. The silver medalist doesn't get their name on the cereal box. But and so a lot of times in our society, we seem to only really glom onto or prioritize the elite or the top winners. But just being out there, just crossing the finish line is success. And we get to define that for ourselves. So we don't have to follow the societal conditioning of, you have to be super elite to be worthwhile. I mean, it's a very dysfunctional belief. So letting ourselves define our own success and asking ourselves what success really means to us is kind of my big takeaway from that one.
Good for you. That's a good point. I would imagine all of these runs were pretty inspirational. The Athens one had to be, it's so historic in that area.
Yes.
Which one do you, as you look back on them, was the most inspirational to you? If there was one that stood out, how would you?
They all stood out in their own way. And actually, in my book, at the end of each chapter, there's a chapter for each marathon, and I actually say what each one was my favorite for. So each one stood out to me, was inspirational, and was my favorite for something very different. So for example, the next one, I did the Great Wall Marathon in China, and that one really stood out to me for being the most profound teamwork and camaraderie and human connection. It really took everybody working together to finish that one. It was pretty intense. And so,
what do you mean by that? Took everybody working together. What do you mean by that?
Right. So for me personally, anyway, when I got to China, long story short, I had thought I had an injury, and I had actually not run in 6 weeks. And I also, my GPS watch was also dead, and I hadn't brought my charger because I was like, well, I'm only going to need it once, and so I charged it before I left, and then it was dead when I arrived. And for me, I am a run walker, so I don't run fast, I don't win, but I will cross the finish line. So I would run for 5 minutes and walk for a minute, and so I was very dependent on my watch to beep at me in the certain time intervals to tell me when to run and walk, and I didn't have that capacity. And actually, a woman who was on my tour group, she was an Ironman triathlete, so an Iron woman. She had completed an Ironman, and she was in far better shape than I was, but she volunteered to run with me and pace me. So she had her watch going, and we did actually 4 and 2. So we'd run for 4 minutes and walk for 2 minutes, and we did that for the first 21 miles of this marathon. Now, the Great Wall Marathon, I don't know if you've been to the Great Wall of China, but it's very steep, and there's lots of hills, and the whole race wasn't on the steps, but a lot of it was. And so we were going up very steep sections of steps and up and down, and some of the steps are big and some of them are small, and sometimes there's handrails and sometimes there's not. And it's altitude and humidity and heat, and everything about it was just very intense. So I would not have made it. Yeah, go ahead.
Without help. I was going to ask you what is most of these, well, maybe not. I guess you're running these marathons through Big Sur. It's not like you're running on a paved highway, all these places. What was the footing like on the going? And I haven't been to the Great Wall, so I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Is it like cobblestones that you're running on, or what?
Right. The stairs were pretty. Yeah, they were kind of like cobblestones or brick along various different parts of the way. And then when we were off the wall, we were on more like asphalt roads. And so it was paved. There were other marathons I ran were not all paved, but I'm trying to think. Big Sur, Athens, and China so far were pretty much all paved, but at different levels of smoothness, as it were. But the super cool thing that continued about the Great Wall was that, so this woman had helped me get through the first 21 miles, and then I actually came across someone else from my tour group who had totally given up. He had just run out of steam, and he was sitting on the steps and said, they can come pick me up tomorrow. And so I sat down with him and actually said, hey, I've been doing this, going up 20 steps at a time and then resting. How about if we just walk up 10 steps and then rest? And he said, I think I could do that. And so we climbed up 10 steps and we sat down, and then we climbed up 10 more and we sat down, and we climbed up 10 more. And so we kept doing that. And there were a couple of sections where we ended up just doing 5 steps. Like, let's just go 5 and sit and rest. And eventually we made it off the wall. And so this race had an 8-hour time limit. And we ended up crossing the finish line hand in hand at 7 hours and 53 minutes. So we had 7 minutes to spare. So when I say it took teamwork and camaraderie and people working together, it was actually people prioritizing helping each other over their own finish times, and just the human compassion and just prioritizing that care and getting someone else across the finish line was a really, really powerful experience for me.
Wow. I understand your book, and I haven't seen it, is a stunning book of photography. And I'm just wondering, were these pictures you took, or not necessarily ones that you took? How would you answer that?
Yes, they're my photos. Yes, I actually love photography, and I took a lot of photos along the way. And incidentally, I made all my photo albums as I went, and not actually intending to, or realizing that in the future I would be creating a coffee table book about them. But I had friends saying things like, wow, you have a really great photographic eye, and hey, if that science thing doesn't work out, at least you have a backup plan. And well, here I am, right? So yes, it was actually really cool, because I had not intended to necessarily make a book out of it, but it just emerged as, and in 2019 I was actually trying to write a book about leadership, and thinking everyone and their dog has written a book about leadership. What am I going to say that's any different? And I was actually in a period of just sort of asking questions of the universe, and the idea for the coffee table book just kind of landed and said, well, duh, of course, that's what I already have. That is what I'm here to create next. And I actually then, in thinking about it and putting it together, I actually learned so much about my marathon journey and about myself, things that I hadn't necessarily reflected on before. So that was also a very cool retrospective experience from the marathon journey.
And you write about this in the book, don't you? You give a lot of your stories and memoirs about it. It's got to be a fascinating book. It really has to be.
I think so.
Let's talk about you said 7 continents. You've done the 7 continents. What about Asia? Tell me, where'd you run there?
Yep. So that was the Great Wall that we just talked about. Yep. For Asia,
right.
And then, but so next was Africa.
Africa.
And in Africa, I was in Kenya, and we actually ran a marathon in the Lewa Wildlife Conservancy. So we kind of joked that this was the best one for people who said, I'll never run unless something is chasing me. So we were actually in a game park, and thankfully we were not chased by anything.
The giraffe and the many species of deer that they have and things like that. There were actually the giraffe crossed our path on our way to the race start. They did actually have some helicopters that were keeping kind of the big game away, although the game pretty much stayed away from humans anyway. But so we didn't see as much wildlife on the course itself, but we did do safaris before and after, and it was that was very cool. So we got to see a lot of wildlife, which actually, for my lesson learned in Africa, that was actually one of the big ones. Was before the race we were on a safari looking for elephants, and
and we're in the truck, and we're so focused on the road ahead, looking for elephants. Or we're looking for anything, but we were thinking we'd particularly see some elephants. And we were just all peeling our eyes down the road when someone happened to look over to their left and say, "Oh, look, there's one right there." And there was this huge elephant just off the side of the road that none of us had seen, that we almost just drove right by. And that, for me, was a really big reminder also to stay in the present moment and actually notice what's around you. Something, we're so focused on the road ahead that we missed what was already right there. And so I think sometimes we are actually chasing something that is actually already present in our lives, and unless we pause and notice that it's already there, we're just going to keep running, thinking that we don't have it yet, and that it's not attainable. So that was a really big reminder to actually pause, notice what's around you, and be in the moment instead of always looking off to the future or being stuck in the past or anything like that. So really noticing what's around you.
These are all great lessons that you use when you're coaching your clients on how to live an epic life, aren't they?
Yes,
I mean, it's kind of been a big help to you. Yeah. Oh,
yes.
I can't imagine. Let's see. You did Africa. Then how about Antarctica? You ran there. That had to have been cold.
I did.
I don't know how you did that. Tell me.
It was cold. It was cold, and I layered up, and I have to confess, it was in fact about 40 degrees on our run, but it was also 40-mile-an-hour wind, and it was rainy, and it was muddy, and it was rocky, and it was just everything. I mean, I was covered in mud by the end, and totally felt like I had run in Antarctica. And so yeah, that was very intense. Antarctica was absolutely beautiful. And when you talk about inspiration, I think that was definitely one of the most, or maybe the most beautiful place I've ever been. It was so pristine. So few people have actually been to Antarctica. You just in moments when you could hear the ice cracking and just hear the sounds and see the sights, it just felt absolutely amazing. I absolutely loved it. But one of the things that's not, a little bit of a side thing, but turned out to be a big lesson for me was the idea of perspective, because I did several races in the Southern Hemisphere, but I particularly remember noticing on the Antarctica trip, looking at the stars and noticing that Orion was upside down and backwards, and the star Sirius was on the wrong side from my perspective. And I was thinking, wow, the stars look weird down here. And then, of course, it immediately occurred to me, well, that's probably what people from the Southern Hemisphere think when they go to the Northern Hemisphere. And so,
wow.
Right. So it's all in kind of what you've grown up with, what you're used to. And so taking note and remembering that not everybody sees the world the same way that you do. And something as simple as, I've noticed this even from either living on the east side or the west side of the mountains. You're either your sun rises or your sun sets over the mountains. And it's totally different from someone who lives maybe 70 miles away. So how does the world, if you can imagine that the world just looks completely different to someone else, and that no single one of us has a monopoly on the truth or the true perspective, that we actually have to communicate and say, hey, what does the world look like from where you're standing? That was a pretty big lesson there too for me. And another good one I use in my coaching a lot, because I get a lot of people who are kind of like set. They're like, this is what happened. I'm like, is that really what happened? And so how else can you tell this story that you're telling right now?
Wow. What great stories! By the way, you talk about how you use these lessons in coaching people. I know you're not far from the Washington D.C. area. Do you work with people in person, or do you work with them on Zoom? Because suppose somebody wants to benefit from your coaching experience, and they're in California or Minnesota or whatever. Do you work with them on Zoom like that?
I absolutely do. I actually love virtual work. I've had clients from around the world, actually, and so that's been, I think even in the pandemic, that's been a beautiful gift that we've learned how powerful virtual work actually can be. I mean, kind of before the pandemic, I had done some international work and some Zoom work, but I also was a really big fan of face-to-face, and of course I still am, but seeing how profound it can be just to have a conversation. I mean, I can do it on a phone without Zoom, but I do prefer the Zoom just for the video, being able to see someone. But yes, I absolutely love working with people from anywhere, and I don't think geography limits us, which is a beautiful thing.
Well, I'm going to give your website out in a minute or two so that anybody who might be interested in getting in touch with you or getting your book, they can all do that on your website. I want to ask you about, we may not get all these races in, but South America, how about that? Your marathon in South America. Where'd you do that?
I did that one actually on the island of Rapa Nui, which is also known as Easter Island. So the island with the big statues that you see all the crazy pictures of. And that one was cool. I actually ended up running a part of that one barefoot. So I had actually gotten into barefoot running during the course of these marathons, and I knew I wasn't going to run 26 miles barefoot, but in the Rapa Nui Marathon, I'd run about 5 miles and then take off my shoes and run for a bit, without my shoes. And I actually crossed the finish line barefoot, which was really cool. But that one also was a cool one. There were not very many people in the race, and that was the only marathon that I actually won my age and gender category, because I was the only person in my age and gender category. But I kind of laughed about that one because, theoretically that was a win. But for me, always in all of these, it was really the run itself that was the win. And it was about really recognizing that the journey is the destination. And it's kind of harkening back to that success from Athens. And it's not about the gold medal. It's really about just the experience. And a lot of times in the Rapa Nui one, I was the only one on the road that I could see. There was no one ahead of me. There was no one behind me. And I just felt like I was just out there in nature, just one with the universe, and it was a really cool feeling. So just savoring the whole journey piece of that was really cool. On an island that is just mysterious in general, just kind of being in this sort of surreal place and being in a really cool presence and state of being was great.
So great. And the last race was Australia, right? Tell me about that.
Yes, it was. Yep, and that was the Solar Eclipse Marathon. So it was actually in conjunction with a total solar eclipse, and the starting gun was when the sun's rays came back out from behind the moon. So that was super cool. It was a cool kind of lesson on alignment. But what I really noticed there was, I don't know if you've ever seen a solar eclipse, but the most amazing thing to me about it was how little sun it took to just light up the world again after the eclipse. It was a tiny sliver. And so just the very first ray of sun coming out from behind the moon just lit up the world again completely after the darkness of the eclipse period. And to me, that's just a metaphor for all of us. If you ever feel overwhelmed by the enormity of the change you're trying to make in the world, just know that a tiny sliver of light is enough to transform the darkness. And we can all be that tiny sliver of light and just cause such a huge ripple effect in the world. So that was a really powerful lesson for me.
Boy, your lessons are great. No kidding. By the way, I wanted to ask you. You talked about your age category, and you whether you were by yourself in your category. Give me an idea of the age range you're talking about when you did all these marathons.
Yes, so I was actually I was 27 to 32. And in fact, now I am going to actually age myself, but I actually finished the Solar Eclipse Marathon, my last one, 10 years ago, 2 days ago. So November 14th of 2012, I finished the marathon. So it was kind of cool a couple days ago celebrating that, wow, that was 10 years ago. What a milestone. What an accomplishment. So, yes.
What an accomplishment for all of these. And is there one theme that ran through all your marathons? If there was, what would it be? How would you answer that?
It would be that really just putting one foot in front of the other and taking things literally one step at a time. You start something and it seems like, oh my gosh, 26 miles, that feels like forever. But you put one foot in front of the other and eventually you will have only 1 mile to go. And so it's just keep at it, keep doing it, one foot in front of the other. Yep.
All right, Melissa, here's your website, everybody. Write this down, epiclifeactually.com, epiclifeactually.com. If you go there, you can learn all about Dr. Melissa Carter's adventures, and you can learn about how to get that book, that fabulous, amazing picture book called Running the World, Marathon Memoirs from the Seven Continents. Dr. Carter will be back with us again on December the 2nd, and then she'll be back again after that on, December 20th. So 3 different broadcasts. Dr. Melissa, thanks for being with us today. You're an amazing guest. Thank you so much. Okay?
Thank you so much, Doug. I appreciate it.
You are very, very welcome. Thanks, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this. I know I did.
You have been listening to a broadcast from Close Up Radio, a division of Close Up Television Incorporated. For more information about our show and to be considered for future broadcasts, please visit closeuptelevision.com. You may also learn about us on social media and listen to us on podcast and internet radio. Thank you for joining us, and we hope that you have an empowered and productive day.
That we do. I'm Doug Llewelyn. I'll see you next time, everybody. Till then, take care. Bye for now.